What's up, everyone? My name is Omar Othman. I'm going to be explaining ECG 1, the introduction to ECG that we took, as well as the introduction to the leads. It's going to act as a revision for myself, but if anybody benefits from it, that would be very helpful. All right? Okay, so I'm going to start from the basics. The basics are basically the SA node and the AV node action potentials, right? And so this is what the SA node and the AV node action potentials look like, right? And we're going to start from the beginning. So the beginning is this part. This part right here is basically the resting potential of the action potential of the SA node or the AV node, right? But it's not ever resting. It's always moving, as you can see. This is here. It's always going up. And here, it's also going up, right? So what causes this? What causes it to always be depolarizing slowly? They are the funny sodium channels, right? And basically these funny sodium channels, they slowly let in sodium. They slowly let in a positive charge into the cell, decreasing it from -60, slowly down till it reaches around -40, right? And so this is the threshold, right? When it reaches this threshold of around -40, it triggers something inside the cell to activate calcium channels, L-type calcium channels. And these channels, when they activated, they open, and that allows calcium to surge in, right? So allows positively charged calcium ions, so positive charges to come into the cell. So it's slowly building up a positive charge. No, well, it's not that slow, but it's not as fast as other channels. But it slowly builds up a positive charge in the cell until it reaches around the peak, right? And this is what we call phase zero. So calcium is slowly entering until it reaches the peak, and then they slowly start to close. They slowly open and they slowly start to close. And at the same time, at this peak, potassium channels also open, right? And potassium, it doesn't want to enter the cell, it wants to leave. So when these potassium channels open, potassium also slowly leaves out of the cell, right? And that's what we're seeing here. Positive charge are leaving the cell. So when positive is leaving, it's making the cell more negative, right? Slowly down here until it reaches back down to what we saw over here, until it reaches phase zero, or phase four. So we have phase four, basically the resting with the funny channels, phase zero with the L-type calcium channels opening, and then you have the peak, they start to close, potassium channels start to open, starting phase three. And then it goes back to phase four, right? And this is for the SA node and the AV node. And then we go back, and then we go, the SA node, it's the pacemaker. So it's going to give a stimulus to the muscles of the heart, right? So now we're going to look at the action potential of everything but the SA node and the AV node. So the Purkinje fibers, the cardiomyocytes, everything in the cell, all muscles in the heart, sorry, other than the SA node and the AV node, are going to have an action potential similar to this, right? So the SA node is going to give a stimulus, maybe sodium or calcium ions that travel through gap junctions from the SA node, and they come into this cell, this cardiomyocyte, or cardiomyocyte. It enters and it causes a tiny depolarization, right? And as soon as they enter, fast sodium channels, these are super fast sodium channels, right? They open. And why do we call them fast? Because you can see in this short period, even shorter than what I drew, in this short period, it has already depolarized to maybe positive 30 millivolts, all right? And so they're super fast. And these are the only things that are opening right now. Okay. But at the peak, they close. They're fast at opening and they're fast at closing, these fast sodium channels, right? They close. And then other channels start to open, potassium and calcium channels. But these potassium and calcium channels are a bit slower, right? So what happens, what causes and so because they're slow, it causes this this little bit of a slight repolarization, right? A slight repolarization until the calcium channels start to open, which they do here. They're a bit slow, right? And so this is the time it takes for the calcium channels to open. Once the calcium channels they open, something happens inside the cell called calcium induced calcium release. We took this in FND, but it's basically calcium. It enters the cell through something called the T-tubule. It enters the cell, right? It binds to this sarcoplasm inside the cell, right? And when it binds to these ryanide receptors, uh, when calcium binds to those receptors, a lot of calcium that's inside, or you have this sarcoplasm, you have a lot of calcium inside. So when it binds, it opens these gates, and a lot of the calcium exits the sarcoplasm and are now inside the cell, right? And so when they're inside the cell, now you have a huge depolarization. A lot of positive charges are now in the cell, are now in the cytoplasm, right? And that causes a huge depolarization. But as you can see here, it's not that huge. Why? Well, they're balanced out by the opening of potassium channels, right? Potassium is now leaving the cell while calcium is surging inside the cell. So it's sort of like a balance. And this is what causes the plateau. This is what causes it to take longer, right? And this is very important for this plateau to happen, right? You don't want it to be short. You want the muscles to be contracted for a bit, for a while, so that they can fill up, and then they can relax afterwards, right? So this is what causes the plateau, and then the calcium channels start to close here, and the potassium channels stay open. So you have potassium leaving all the way down until it reaches back to the resting potential, phase four, right? So we start with phase four, the resting, and then you have a stimulus from the SA node, phase zero, fast sodium channels. Fast sodium channels close here. And when they close, there's phase one, where basically nothing's open except a little bit of so potassium leaky channels, which cause it to go a bit down. And then in this time frame, the calcium channels would have opened, starting phase two. Calcium induced calcium release, but also you have potassium channels opening, so they're balancing out. And then once the calcium channels they close, phase three kicks in, where only the potassium channels are open, and it repolarizes all the way back into phase four. Okay. Right. Now we should look at the bigger picture of the action potential. So you have the SA node. Right. Here is the threshold potential. Here is depolarization. Right. When they depolarize, right, it's going the this signal is going to travel from one cell to another cell to another cell, right, through these gap junctions. Right. They're basically just gaps between the cells, right? And they let in sodium between them, sodium and calcium. All right. And as we said, that causes a stimulus for the other cells, and it basically does this repetitive cycle of action potential, right? And these gap junctions are they're very abundant in the atria. They're very abundant in myocardiocites. They're not very abundant where? In the AV node, right? Why? Because you want to have a delay. You want to have a delay between when the atrium and when the ventricle. You want to have a delay so that when the atrium pumps, you have some time for the ventricle to fill up before the ventricle pumps. Okay, so we have the stimulus here. It starts from the SA node. It goes to the atriums, right? The atrias pump, and this is what we're seeing here, right? This is the action potential of the atria. Okay, and then by the time the atrius pump, it reaches the AV node, but the AV node has a delay because of the lack of gap junctions, so it's going to take longer for the action potential to travel, right? And by the time that would be around like here, and by the time that it reaches the ventricles, it's we're already like 0.2 seconds in or 0.16 seconds in. and then the ventricles can travel. But this is what it looks like, and it's all recorded. We can all record this on something called the ECG, right? And we'll talk about the ECG now, all right? And so the ECG, what it does, it picks up electrical signals from the heart. It picks up any electrical currents anywhere in your body. Well, sorry, it picks up any electrical currents anywhere in your heart, right? So, and this electrical current can be sensed from the skin. So if you put these electrodes, things that basically things that sense electrical signals on your skin, they can tell you what's occurring basically inside your body. And what's causing this is the SA node. So it can be narrowed down to the heart, right? But it only senses the movement of electrical currents. When it's fully depolarized, there's no movement. It's fully positive. And if it's fully repolarized, it's like fully negative, right? So there's nothing happening. But when it's moving from a repolarized state to a depolarized state, or slowly moving back down to a repolarized state, that's when you can sense it. And that's when you see these spikes. You see these spikes in the currents, and that's what the electrodes are reading. Okay, now let's talk about the movement of the electricity, of movement of action potential throughout the heart. Okay, so we have the SA node. The SA node is the pacemaker of the heart. Okay, and the SA node is gonna create an action potential as we saw, and it's gonna want to pump the atrias, and it's also gonna want the action potential to travel to the AV node. Okay, so for the action potential to travel to the atrias, it's going to go through gap junctions because the SA node is located in the right atrium. It's going to go through gap junctions to depolarize the atrium, for the right atrium. But for it to travel to the left atrium, it cannot. There's a septum here. What is it going to use? It's going to use the interatrial pathway, or something called the Bachmann's bundle, right? And this is what allows it to depolarize the left atrium. Okay, but action potential also wants to travel to the AV node. So it's going to use the internodal pathway between nodes for the action potential to travel. It takes around 0.3 seconds for the atrias to depolarize, and not for the atrias to depolarize, for the action potential to travel to the atrias and for it to travel to the AV node. So it reaches the AV node 0.3 seconds, 0.03 seconds after the action potential from the SA node. Okay. And once it reaches the AV node, there's going to be a delay. There's always going to be a delay at the AV node. The AV node is super slow. Why is it slow? Well, we said for the action potential travel is going to go through gap junctions and pathways. But at the AV node, there's a lack of gap junctions. So the action potential is going to take a while for it to travel between cell to cell. And that's what's going to cause a delay. The delay is very important. You don't want the atrias and the ventricles to pump at the same time, right? You need the ventricle to fill up before it pumps. Okay, so you want the atria to pump first and then the ventricles. And this is what the delay causes, right? The delay is very important. The delay is around 0.1 seconds, right? Or 100 milliseconds. And that's when the action potential finally travels from the AV node to the bundle of His, right? And then from the bundle of His, it goes through the right and the left bundle branches all the way down to the Purkinje fibers that you can see over here. Okay, and this is how the electricity travels through the heart. And then that's when it depolarizes. And then that's it depolarizes, it contracts the muscles. But the muscles also have to relax. So it's going to travel back. It went this way, it depolarized this way. Now it's going to travel the opposite way back to repolarize. So it's going to go all the way like this, right? And it's going to repolarize backwards. And there's a way you can memorize how fast each part of the heart is at conducting electricity or conducting action potential. So the speed of conduction, it has a mnemonic, and you can memorize it by he parks at Ventura Avenue. He parks at Ventura Avenue. He and Parks are for his and Purkinje. They take around 0.03 or 30 milliseconds, right? For action potential to travel through them. Atrias take around 0.05 or 6, so 60 or 50 or 60 milliseconds. Um, and then finally you have the AV node. The AV node is super slow. We said it's around 0.1 seconds or 100 milliseconds. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about the ECG. This is what one basically a beat looks like in the ECG. Okay. You start off by the SA node and it's uh depolarizing the atrias, right? And this causes a wave. The ECG, the electrodes that are attached to the body, they read the electrical impulse as this tiny up wave, right? And we call this the P wave. It's the wave of depolarization of the atrias. Okay, and when they're fully depolarized, as we said, when they're fully depolarized, there's no more charged moving through the there's no more movement of charges. So it's going to be a little flat line, right? And by this time it would have by this time it would have reached the AV node, and here the AV node is still delayed. So this is the AV node delay. It's around 0.1 seconds. But the total from here to here is around 0.16 all the way to 0.2. So 160 milliseconds to 200 milliseconds. Okay. Then we're going to have the action potential travel from the AV node down the bundle of His through the right, and left bundle branches until it basically reaches the Purkinje fibers, but it would have just reached them. Okay. And this starts the depolarization of the ventricles, right? And when these ventricles start depolarizing, this is when we see the QRS complex. So we have P, and then what are the letters that are after P? Q, R, S. And this little part here is the Q, this peak is the R, and this little part here, this downward is the S. Okay, and so that's the QRS, and then after that, but at the same time that the ventricles are depolarizing, or they start to depolarize, the atrias are depolarizing. You can see that in red. Red is depolarizing. So they're depolarizing, they're relaxing. Why don't you see them relaxing, right? We said this is an upward because of depolarization. Why don't you see a downwards over here, for example, for depolarization? Well, it's actually masked. It's actually masked by the hugeness of the like how big the peak is for ventricle depolarization. Okay, and then we continue off here. The rest of the ventricles have fully depolarized, right? And so that's why when they're fully depolarized, that's why you see a flat line, basically, small flat line. It's because there's no movement of charges anymore. And then we start repolarizing the ventricles. So they're relaxing. Okay. And as we said, we depolarize this way. We're going to repolarize back from the center. So we're going to repolarize back this way, and this way. So the first thing that started depolarizing was the His. And the last thing that was depolarizing was this. We're going to travel back this way. Okay? Repolarizing everything. So we're repolarizing, and this is what starts the T wave. The T wave is the repolarization wave of the ventricles. And once they're fully repolarized, we have a flat line again because we have no movement of charges. Okay? Okay. And so how do we characterize a heartbeat? Well, we take it from the beats per minute. How do we know how many beats per minute are the heart rate of someone? It's from the depolarization of one ventricle to the depolarization of another ventricle, right? And the space for the time from one peak to another peak is the beats per minute. So you take the time, let's say it's around 0.8, right? Usually from here to here is around 0.5, and this time is around 0.3, so it's around 0.8 per heartbeat, but it changes from person to person. right? 0.8, you take 60 divided by 0.8, and then you get how many beats a person's having per minute. Okay? All right. So let's talk about the timings, okay? So from the depolarization, sorry, of the atria to the depolarization of the ventricles, we have the PR interval. The PR interval is very important, right? This PR interval tells you the time from the SA node, from the action potential coming from the SA node, all the way until it reaches the ventricles, the cardiomyocytes of the ventricles, and they start actually depolarizing. And this time, as you see here, it's around 0.16 seconds, but it can also go all the way to 0.2 seconds. So it's 0.16 to 0.2 or 160 milliseconds to 200 milliseconds. And this is the normal range. Anything above that, anything above 0.2 or 200 milliseconds is going to be caused by a partial block of the AV node, and that could have its consequences. And you can learn about that in the next lecture. Um, Also, you have 0.16 to 0.2, and then from the depolarization of the ventricles all the way to the end of the repolarization of the ventricles is around 0.35 seconds. Okay, so a normal uh basically a beat of the heart is going to take around 0 point, let's say 52 seconds. This is like the max, right? Or 0.55 seconds, and this is around the max. Okay, now let's talk about the leads. Well, the leads are a very important part of the ECG, is because that's where you are putting your electrical signal on, or electrodes that are measuring the electrical signal from the heart, right? And it might sound very complicated, but once I explain it, it's going to be very, very simple, right? It's a very simple concept. Okay, you have your leads. Okay, you have an electrode on your right arm, one on your left arm, and one on your left leg. Okay, so this is right, left, left arm, and left leg. Okay, so the one on your right arm, just remember it's always negative, negative on both sides, negative here and negative here. Okay, it's always negative. The one on your left leg is always positive, right? Right arm Right arm is always negative on both sides. Right leg is always positive on both sides. And then left arm is negative and positive. Okay, I'll explain it. So the leads are measuring the electricity coming from the heart, from the SA node, they're basically measuring all the electricity, but it's measuring from the SA node to the AV node and back, or to the Purkinje fibers and back. Okay. And so, but they can only measure it, they can only look at it in a certain angle. They can't get all the angles at once. Okay. The lead one is measuring from the right arm to the left arm, right? And we said here is negative and here's positive. So it's measuring this way from negative to positive. And this is what it sees. This is all it can see. It can see just this line, just this over here. Okay. Lead three. This is lead three. Lead three is measuring from the left arm to the left leg. Okay. And we said it's the left arm is positive here and negative here. It's measuring here from negative to positive here. Okay. So it's always measuring from down. Just remember this triangle. Okay. This triangle, like this, okay, and this. It's pointing down, and this is pointing from right to left. It's pointing right from your point of view, but from the right arm to the left arm. Okay, this triangle. Two going down, and it's always pointing to the positive, from negative to positive. Okay, so yeah, I was talking about the lead number 3 is pointing from negative to positive here, and it's going to be best just looking at this diagonal here. That's all it can see. It can't see anything else. It can't see anything going this way. Anything going this way is going to look just like one point to it. Imagine you're looking at a train, but the train is facing you. You're going to see just the face of the train. You can't see the length of the train. And that's exactly what lead 3 is doing, right? And same thing for lead 2. It's just looking at this diagonal, right? And why is lead 3 the most important? We're going to talk about that. Or sorry, why is lead 2 the most important? We're going to talk about that, but it has to do with the fact that the heart's action potential, it's going this like a very similar direction to what lead 2 is looking at. So it can basically see the action potential go through the heart at a very, like it can see most of what's happening. Not everything, but it can see most of what's happening. Okay? All right. So lead 1 and lead 2, and lead 3 and lead 2. Okay? This is what they look like if you just put them side by side. Lead 1 is going to measure this, lead 2 is going to measure this, and lead 3 is going to measure this. What can you see here? You can see that lead 1 here is pretty small. Lead 2 here is very large, and lead 3 here is around the average of them. But actually, it's not the average. It's lead 1 and lead 2. When you add them up, when you add this, what they both get up, that you get lead 2. And this is what you have to understand. It's because lead 1 and lead 3 are measuring the angles that lead 2 aren't seeing, but when you add them up, it's basically what lead 2 is seeing. And so you get this. Lead 2 is equal to lead 1 and lead 3. It's very important to understand this. Okay? All right. So there are other leads. We're not going to the professor didn't talk about them in this lecture, so I can't really explain them to you because I haven't taken them yet. But there are other leads. And we talked that they are placed, these are the V leads, the V1, the V2, the V3, the V4, the V5, and the V6. They're placed in these areas. Okay? 1, 2, and then you go 3, 4, 5, all the way until you get to the lateral axillary side. Okay, and then you have, so these are the V leads, and this is what they measure here. They each measure something different, but we haven't talked about that in class. And then you have the other leads, three other leads. You have AVR, the lead of the right arm to the belly button, or below the belly button a little bit. And then you have the lead of the left arm, AVL. Then you have AVF, the lead of the left leg. Okay, and this is also what they measure. All right, and when you collect everything from all of these leads and you put them side by side on one chart, right? This is what you see. This is what you see, and each lead provides a different perspective of what the heart is doing. One is from one side, the other is from the other side, right? Because you can only look at something basically in a 2D perspective. So if you gather up all the 2D perspectives, you can have a 3D partial image of what the heart is doing. And this is what we're doing with the leads. So we'll be looking at the heart, okay? And how the leads interact with the potential difference in the heart. Okay, and we're going to be talking a little bit about vectors here, but trust me, it's once I explain, it's going to be inshallah very simple. Okay, so vectors, they measure two things. They measure direction and they measure a magnitude. Okay, remember, they measure only with direction and magnitude. Okay, so this is the vector of depolarization right here, this arrow. It's the depolarization of the heart from just the ventricles, right? So the ventricle, the septum, all the way down this way. Okay. And what and you can see here that the heart isn't facing you forward like this. It's actually tilted a little bit to the left, and you can see here the apex and the base, right? So this is the direction of the vector. And how do the leads interpret the direction? As you said, the leads are like this. We want to have one lead going like this, and we have two leads going like this. Right? Let me draw them out. We have one lead going like this, one lead going like this, and one lead going like this. Let's remember we have lead 1, this is lead 1, and this is lead 3, okay? And this is lead 2. Okay. So this is the vector. Let's draw this vector out over here. Okay, let's draw this vector out over here. This is the vector, let's say, for the potential difference or the direction of the action potential. Okay. So now, how is each lead going to read? How is each lead going to read it? Well, the first lead number 1, is going to look at it. Is gonna look at it. It's starting from here all the way to here. So it's gonna start. It's gonna go here. Doesn't see anything. Doesn't see anything. Now it sees its tail. It sees the start. Right. So it's gonna start. It's gonna look at it. It's gonna start the vector, and it's gonna keep looking. It's gonna keep drawing. It's gonna keep drawing all the way until it reaches the head. Right. And this is what it's gonna see. It's going to see a vector. It's going to see this vector like this, right? So this is what lead 1's going to read. Lead 1's going to read, see how large this, let's say the magnitude of this was 5. Well, this might read as magnitude 3, right? Because it's a shorter, the vector is shorter, it's smaller than this one, right? So this is what lead 1 is going to read. What is lead 2 going to read? Right? Let's look at lead 2. Lead 2 is going to read it like this. Same way. It's going to start from here and end here. It's going to start here. It's going to see it starts the vector here and it keeps going all the way until it reaches the end. And this is what it's going to read. It's going to read something like this. Okay? And because it's going the same direction as lead 3, this vector is going the same direction of lead 3. The head is at the same direction of the head, so it's going to be positive. Same thing for lead 1 here. The head is the same direction of the head, so it's going to be positive as well. Okay? Same thing for lead 2. We're going to read it. This is going to be the tail. This is going to be the head. It's going to read it like this. And it's also the same direction as lead 2, so it's going to be positive. Okay? Now, we're going to talk about this a bit more for each step of the ECG, but let's talk about the other leads, right? Not in detail because he didn't explain it to us in detail, but let's talk about the other ones. So the other leads, the other leads here, well, you have 3 ways of measuring them. Here we only used lead 1, lead 2, lead 3. Here we can use other leads like the AVR, the AVL, and the AVF, and the V1 to V6, and you can combine them all together to get a bit more of a 3D perspective of the heart instead of just a 2D like we did here, right? So, and they each have a name. So the one where we're only using lead 1, we're only using lead 1, lead 2, and lead 3 is called Einthoven, and it's bipolar. It's very important to know that it's bipolar because I'm pretty sure it's bipolar because here it's negative and here it's positive, right? But he didn't explain it, but he said that it's called Einthoven and it's bipolar. And this is where we only use lead 1, lead 2, and lead 3. When you start adding other leads, we're going to start by adding AVR, AVL, and AVF, right? And it's going to be called Goldberger limb leads, and it's unipolar, right? Goldberger limb leads. And basically halfway in the lead 2 you have AVL, halfway in lead 3 you have AVR, and then going directly down is the foot, AVF. All right. And then you have the Carbera circle, and this combines everything. It combines lead 1, lead 2, lead 3. It combines the AVL, AVR, AVF, and it combines all the V1 to V6, right? And it puts them on over here. And basically, you could and basically you can determine the ECG by its angle. He didn't talk about it at all, but just know that it's called Carbera circle. This is called Goldberger limb leads. It's unipolar, and the Einthoven bipolar. All right, now. All right, we're going to be looking at in depth each phase of the depolarization of the ventricles, right? So we're going to start. Basically, you have this is the ECG, so what it's going to look like, right? You're going to go like down, up, down, and then back here, and then you have the little T wave, right? We're not talking about the P wave or the T wave right here. We're just talking about the QRS complex, right? This thing over here. Okay, let's start from the beginning of the QRS complex. You're gonna have a depolarization wave, and as I said, the depolarization is this way, right? When it's going from his to left and right bundle branches, you gotta know something. The left bundle branch is a little bit faster than the right bundle branch, right? So you're gonna have well, here he drew just one arrow, but this is what it actually looks like over here. This is what it actually looks like. This is the depolarization of the heart, right? You have the left bundle branch depolarizes a bit faster than the right bundle branch. And as we talked about before, as we talked about in the slides before, this slide in particular, here we're seeing that it's going from negative to positive. Negative to positive. This is where depolarization is going from, negative to positive, right? So it's going to point from the negative places to the positive places. And here, when the left bundle branch depolarizes before the right bundle branch, the left is going to be negative, and this part of the right is going to be positive. So it's going to be pointing a bit backwards. It's going to be pointing like this. And let's draw that out. let's draw that out. So we're gonna have this triangle, the Einthoven triangle, right? And we're gonna draw this. This is the vector that we're seeing over here. Okay? It's like this, right? And this is positive here, it's negative to positive here, positive, and here it's negative. Okay? And so here, as we can see here, is going from this is negative and this is the positive, is going from negative to positive. All right, and this is what each one's gonna is going to see. The first part is going to see the lead one is going to see it like this. It's going to see the head first and the tail second. So it's gonna see it like this. All right? And since it's going the opposite direction, this is the direction of lead one, and it's going the opposite direction. So it's going to see it as negative. And this is the magnitude of the length is the magnitude of lead one. Lead three is going to see the the head first, then the tail again. So it's going to look like this. And it's also going the opposite direction. Then lead two is going the opposite direction. So it's also going to be negative. And so we have lead one negative, and you have lead two negative. Or sorry, lead three negative. Now let's look at lead two. How does lead two read it as well? Lead two is going to see the tail first, before the head first before the tail. So it's going to also read it negative. So lead one, lead three, and lead two are going to read it as negative. And the one that we're going to be primarily looking at, because this is going the direction of the heart, the direction from the base of the apex, we're going to be primarily looking at lead two. So lead two is going to read it like this. Read it negative. That's why in the ECG, let's draw it again, right? You're going to have this Q. The Q is caused by the Q in the QRS complex is caused by the left bundle branch depolarizing before the right bundle branch. All right? All right. Now that we've covered that, let's talk about the other ones. Let's talk about it's going now after they're now both depolarized, they're going the same direction. They're going the same direction. So we're going to see them you're going to see them going like this. And uh here they have them more like an X. Basically, they just took this one. They're like this, right? They just took them and they put them all in the center point. So they took this one and they put it here. They took this one and they put it here. And they took this one and they put it here. And that's what they're doing. But they labeled them all. They labeled this lead two, lead one. And so we can still compare and we can see where each one's going. Okay. So here you have this is the direction. This is what this over here. This is the direction. This over here is what lead two reads. It reads it like this. This over here is what lead one reads. And this over here is what lead three reads, okay? And so overall is going to read something, as you can see here, it's going to read pretty close to what lead two reads. It's off by a couple degrees, but it's pretty close to what lead two reads. This is the reason there's a difference here is why we use other leads, AVR, AVA, AVL, AVF, and then from V1 to V6, so we can see the entire perspective from the back, from the sides, from the front, right? Okay. We're then after it's depolarized the septum, the left and the right bundle branch is going to start depolarizing the left and right atrium from the Purkinje fibers, right? And so they're both depolarizing the same rate, the left and the right. So there's no difference. This is not pointing this way, for example. No, it's not. So they're both depolarizing the same way. So it's basically the same thing. And we do the same thing where we look at it. This is the axis. This is the depolarization. This is what lead two reads. It reads it pretty much the same, and it stops here. Lead one reads it from here to here, right? So it's leading this. It's positive as well. And lead three is also reading it from here to here. So it's also positive, right? And it's going to be positive for the rest. It's now more of the left and the right ventricles are depolarizing, and they still cancel out each other. So there's no part where it's going like this. This is negative here, and this is positive here. This is negative here. This is positive here. Technically, it looks something like this, but this vector and this arrow cancels out until you get this straight vector. Okay. So, anyways, this is what you get, and this is what lead two reads over here. It's a bit to the left, so this is what's gonna read. It's gonna read this and this, so it's gonna have this angle. Right? Lead three is going to see it it's going to see it very small because it can only read from here to here. Right? So it's going to think of it as a very small thing, as a very small magnitude, even though it's this long, right? Because lead three is looking at it from this sort of 120 degrees perspective, right? But like you can see there's a big difference between what lead two reads and what lead three reads, and same thing for lead one. Okay, now we'll move on to the final part of the depolarization of the left and right ventricles. And here, this is the right ventricle, and this is the left ventricle, right? The right ventricle has fully depolarized. As you can see, it's fully pinkish, right? But the left ventricle, you can see it's a bit larger than the right ventricle. So there's still this tiny area, tiny space where it has still not depolarized, where it's still positive. So here you have negative, 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 everywhere it's negative, but you have this one spot where it's positive, right? So it's going to point from the mass of negative to to this part of positive, so it's going to point this way. Okay? So this is what we're going to compare to the leads now. This angle. So we're gonna have this. Let's draw it out so it's a bit more visible. I usually like the normal triangle instead of this, but this is what people usually use, right? So you're gonna have this. It's going this way, and this way, and you're gonna have something like this. Okay. Now we're gonna see what each one reads, and we're gonna tell if it's going to be read positive on the ECG or negative, going downwards or upwards, right? So the lead one is going to read it. This is the tail. So the head is going to read it like this. We're gonna read it positive. Lead two, or sorry, lead three, okay, is going to read the head first and then the tail. So it's going to read it like this. So it's gonna read it as negative. Okay. And so read three is reading it negative. Let's look at what read two is reading it. Lead two is reading it like this. It sees the head first and then the tail. So it's going to also be negative, right? So lead two is also reading it negative. This is why we have the S part of the wave, right? We said the Q is caused by the left bundle branch depolarizing before the right bundle branch, and the S part of the wave is caused where it's going down is caused by the left ventricle is larger than the right ventricle. So by the time that the right ventricle has fully depolarized, there's still this one piece of the left ventricle that hasn't, right? And that caused the S wave. But then once that depolarizes, it's fully depolarized. And what we said before is that when it's fully depolarized, there's no movement of charges, right? So so the ECG is going to read nothing. It's going to read a flat line, right? And as you can see, they're all reading 0, 0, 0 on the ECG. And it's going to stay like that until it stops depolarizing, until it repolarizes again. And that's what we're seeing here, from here to here. Okay? And that's it being depolarized. That's around 0.2 seconds. Okay? And then we have this. Now, let's explain this. All right, so now we're going to explain this part, the T wave. The T wave, it's actually the repolarization. We talked about the depolarization of the ventricle. It's actually the T wave is the repolarization of the ventricle. Okay, and why is it going upwards? Shouldn't repolarization be going downwards? This is a depolarization. It's going upwards, right? Just over here, it's going upwards. Why is the depolarization also going upwards? Okay, let's talk about it, right? So let's draw the triangle again, like this, and this. As you can see here, this is the repolarization. It starts from the outer side. They have to remember, the last thing to be depolarized, the last thing here, this is the last thing to be depolarized, is going to be the first thing that is going to be repolarized, right? So the repolarization is going to be moving this way and this way, as you can see from the arrows, in this way, right? And they're going to amount to one arrow moving this way, right? One arrow moving like this. But There's a huge difference. This is not the same thing as depolarization. In depolarization, we're moving from negative to positive. But in repolarization, we're moving from positive to negative, right? So the arrow actually doesn't look like this. It's flipped. The arrow is flipped. It looks like this. It looks like this because you're doing the opposite, right? The leads, we said the leads read from negative to positive. But if you're reading the opposite way, then it's going to flip the direction, right? When you're reading from negative to positive, it's going to flip the direction, right? And so here is going from negative to positive. That's why it's going to, instead of having an arrow that's going down like this, it's going to have an arrow going like this. Okay? Or sorry, instead of having an arrow going up like this, okay, it's going to have an arrow going down like this. Okay. All right. And so then, we're going to look at it now on how each lead is going to be reading that. Each lead is going to, let's start from lead one. Lead one is going to see the tail first and then the head. Is going to read it like this. Right? It's going to read it like this. It's going to read it as positive. Lead three is going to read it like this. Tail first, head second. It's also going to read it as positive. And now same thing for lead two. Lead two is also going to read tail first, head second. And it's also going to be positive, right? And this is what matters to us. Lead two is the most important, and that's why it's a positive. It's an upward wave. Okay, and this is the T wave. All right, and that basically explains the entirety of the ECG. Yeah.